right, bye.
So, Joseph, are you there? I'm not hearing anything. Hey, everybody. Sorry for the delay. There were some technical issues. I hope you can hear me. Um, just checking on the audio now. Everything's unmuted. Things are moving. Sorry, just one second. You, we can hear Maddie, not Joseph. Okay. Okay. Christoph, thank you. I just got a nice little Zoom message from a coworker letting me know that you guys can hear me. Okay, so I'm going to keep an eye on my other screen here and see how things go with Joseph and Kyle. Um, you guys, I am going to send you my phone number in the chat that we're in, so you can text message me, and I'll be able to see it if there's anything that you want to communicate and I'm not actually seeing it. So that's the country code. No, I can't hear you at all. Um, country code and then phone number. So hopefully that's not showing on the screen with you all. Not that I wouldn't give you my number. I probably wouldn't. I don't know how many people are watching. So hi, I'm Maddie. Like I said, we had some technical difficulties, and I apologize for that. But luckily, I can hear that you can hear me, and hopefully, you can see my screen. Um, you should see COVIDEMON. So let's see if I can just get word from Joseph and Kyle. Maybe if that video is working, that video feed is working. They're typing to me. I hope everyone's doing well, wherever you may be, at whatever degree of lockdown you're on. Okay, so in the interest of starting, apologies for the whatever the technical issue is. You just go and I'll call your phone and then answer questions in the chat. Perfect. That sounds fantastic. So that would be an international call. I don't know if I would be paying for an international call though. So maybe if you could FaceTime me, that would be ideal. So I'll put my phone over here, and then I'm going to move off of this chat in a moment as soon as you have FaceTimed me. So I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for coming. I'm going to switch back over to my little notes here. So thank you for all your support. I had a request from a friend in Brazil to say hello to his little boy who is artistic and loves ZBrush and is watching. So hello, hugs to you, Enzo. Um, thank you to Kyle, Joseph, Jaime, Ofer, and everybody at Pixologic for your help. Merci, je suis à bureau en France. Merci pour votre travail. Any excuse to use what little French I have. There we go. So Joseph is now on my screen. Hey, Joseph. All right, so I'm just going to turn up my volume so I can hear you, and this is a workable workaround. All right, so uh, my name is Madeleine Spencer. I'm a creature and character designer, painter, sculptor, artist, texture artist. I have been using ZBrush since 2003, 2004. 1.5B was the first time I started using ZBrush, whenever that came out. And I teach ZBrush. I teach at, let me go through my images here. I teach at Gnomon Online, taught at the brick and mortar school, Gnomon in Los Angeles, for many years before I moved to New Zealand to work on The Hobbit, and stayed in New Zealand for about a decade. Now I live in London. I work at DNAG in London, and do creatures, characters, have all sorts of fun. This is some stuff from DNAG. This is Pacific Rim 2, which was a lot of fun. And Kitty Would Be King, which was a lot of fun. So this was a great show because I got to do concept work on Morgana, and then use that concept ZBrush sculpture to pass into build and models, and then build from that. So I was able to actually follow her quite a ways through the pipeline. There she is in one of her other forms, where she's this long-legged beastie. Let me scroll down here. Right, so I do a lot of training for ZBrush. If you go to the Gnomon workshop, you'll find my Introduction to ZBrush 2020, which is about 20 hours long. Because I believe that if it's going to be an introduction to ZBrush, it should be an introduction to just about everything there is in ZBrush. And I try my best to put everything in there. So at about 20 hours, they're like, okay, it's done. But I hope if you do pursue that, I hope you enjoy it. Like I said, I also teach classes. I teach creature and character design in ZBrush and Photoshop, as well as an Introduction to ZBrush class at Gnomon Online. So if you are interested in learning more, or taking classes, or watching videos, do try and give mine a look. You can find me on Facebook at Madeleine Spencer. You can find me on ArtStation as the same. And you can find me now on Instagram as MaddieMonster_art. So let's see. All right, so today we're doing COVIDEMON, which is COVID for COVID-19, demoni being the Italian plural for demons. So subtitle, Personifying Contagion as Malicious Entity to While Away the Pleasant Springtime Hours. It's lovely out. So I thought it would be interesting to follow that sort of long-standing artistic tradition of representing sort of plague as this personified monster, and sort of see what we could come up with. This is just one of my little thumbnails over here, working through the ideas. So if I scroll down here, I'd like to talk a bit about inspiration. And we are going to jump into ZBrush, don't worry, but I did want to show some slides and talk about some things at the start. So who inspires you? Look in new places to find inspiration. It doesn't always have to be other creature artists, even though that is a wonderful place to be inspired and to learn. I'm inspired by various artists whom I'm going to share with you now, and whose work plays a bit of a role in the concept. I mean, I have a huge number of artists that I'm inspired by. People like, of course, I grew up on Rick Baker and Dick Smith and Rob Bottin, especially. But I want to share some that you might not know of, or you might not think of. For example, here's Odilon Redon, who's a symbolist painter. I'm very, very influenced by the symbolist movement, which is a precursor to surrealism that dealt mainly with mythology and dreamlike paintings, and they used color in a really intense and amazing way, which very much appeals to me as a painter. So Jean Delville is one. He's a 19th century symbolist painter, very big inspiration to me. I think you could probably recognize some elements in this out of things that I have done. It does a lot with sort of aureoles or halos, and things have a very regal, very almost ecclesiastical quality about them, but still quite sinister. This is also a Jean Delville here. Again, very much this bilaterally symmetrical, almost religious iconography. There's all sorts of signifiers in here that are drawn from the culture of the 19th century and the French decadence. So that sort of thing I really like, and I like elements of this, like the color palette. I like the broad graphic shapes. I like the bold statements that are made in a lot of these images, and these are sort of things that influence a lot of what I do. Somebody else that I've revisiting lately is Clive Barker. You probably know Clive Barker as the film director, um, but Clive Barker was an illustrator, playwright, and filmmaker back in early 1980s London, and he's still a painter. His paintings and illustrations are just amazing to me. He's obvious to me. He appears to be very much influenced by Odilon Redon and William Blake with this vibrant color language and these very, very bold graphic shapes that fit together in really appealing ways. Um, I like these negative spaces that he carves into this. We might use negative spaces in this piece today. Just punching holes in things where you don't expect there to be holes. Um, Let me scroll down here. We've got another bit of Barker. So again, more Clive Barker. And again, for me, it's these big statement shapes, these big graphic forms and sweeps that come through. Like for example, this is called Demon Poking Out His Eyes. And it just has this wonderful gestural flow. Um, the economy of line, there's just enough to get the idea across, and there's just a quality about the shapes and the hunching and the curves that are just it's very emotional. It comes across really intensely, and I really like things that have that sort of emotional intensity about them. Moving kind of closer into like entertainment design, very much influenced by Shirin Nirasawa, who unfortunately passed away somewhat recently. But if you're not familiar with Nirasawa, he's was incredible. Um, Again, he's got this playful but sinister surrealism and this languid quality in the figures that I think is really beautiful, especially this devil man here. Nirasawa did some of the original concept design on Biohazard, which was what Resident Evil was in Japan before it came to America. Iced coffee. I drink lots of it, as you can see. Nirasawa is incredible, and there's all this wonderful art that was very surreal and sinister and playful coming out of Japan at the time. That is quite nice. I never really got into anime and all that per se, or even manga, but Nirasawa, I was introduced to Nirasawa through someone else. Another person that I'm quite influenced by is Screaming Mad George. Screaming Mad George is a makeup effects artist. He did lots of major movies like Nightmare on Elm Street movies and whatnot in the 80s and 90s. But George does these really bizarre, playful, surreal kind of sculptures. Um, and there's just something about that playfulness combined with that sinister quality that I quite like, and that surreal element where he's just really not afraid to just twist things up and just be bizarre. So direct influences on today. So there is an ongoing tradition, like I said, of representing plague, even though I don't believe we're living in a plague time. I mean, it's a bad flu. It's serious, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm trying to sow fear. But in the zeitgeist, in everyone's collective consciousness, we're sort of back into that mindset. And of course, art always reflects that. So here we have detail of Humana Fragitalis, Human Frailty by Salvatore Rosa. Um, Representation of sickness and plague. One of my favorite illustrators is Harry Clarke. This is Harry Clarke's Mask of the Red Death, the Poe story. And just this is wonderful, and it influences what I've got in my mind for the gesture and the body of the character today. In that there's this rickety, almost about to tumble over, elongated figure. And I do love the fact that it's the composition here is beautiful with the clock and the figure mirroring each other, and then the big red drapes back here. Well, they're red in the story, but that's actually a key element of the story. Framing the figure, the pictorial composition is wonderful, but the figure itself has this sickly and shambling quality and this twisting quality. And we'll talk about that when we get to pose, like the difference between like a lumbering or a very symmetrical pose and a spiral pose, something that has push and pull in it. And this has push and pull, which we'll talk more about later. Biggest influence on this, however, is Zumbo, the Zumbo waxes. So I don't know if you've ever heard of these or seen them. uh, Zumbo was a wax sculptor in the 17th century. He was a master of the figure and obsessed with disease and corruption because that sort of thing was actually quite common in the 17th century. You saw a lot of death. He's best known for his anatomical models, which are in La Specola in Florence. I went to school in Florence, and I would go visit these as often as I could. It's on the third floor of the Natural History Museum, I think, and it's full of these wax models that are called anatomical Venuses sometimes. There's a wonderful book a friend of mine wrote um, called Anatomical Venuses, and it's basically a study of these wax models, which were usually women in various degrees of anatomical study. Um, and very, very interesting tradition, very beautiful sculpture. So, Zumbo's waxes. This is one of his full size figures. This is the human body, obviously, with veins and nerves exposed. There's one in Specola I couldn't find an image of, which was just the nerves. But instead of just being like, you know, a dude standing there like, "Hi, I am an anatomical model of nerves," he's laying on a silk bed like this, and he looks like he's in pain because it's a Renaissance. um, but incredibly beautiful and sinister and creepy. Now, in a little side room in La Specola, I accidentally found these. These are the Zumbo plague waxes. These are miniatures. So he did these full-size pieces, but he also did these little miniatures here. And I love the way that he uses the various shades of green and the ropey quality of the body. If you see these muscles here, and kind of contrast with this healthy flesh to represent sort of sickness and danger. Um, Here's another view of that. It's quite hard to photograph these because of where they have them. It's actually a really small little side room. You could miss it very easily. But it's quite a depressing little tableau, but beautiful forms. And here probably one of my favorites. So you've got this wonderful gestural anatomy, and then the remnants of the humanity in there, which makes it all the more tragic and frightening. Again, here you've got this, almost Michelangelo-esque physique. Looks like one of Michelangelo's slaves. But these were a big influence. I was just looking at these recently because it's on everyone's mind. It's in the zeitgeist. We're dealing with this sort of pandemic, and so I started thinking back to other artists in history. So I started thinking about like what would COVID look like as a creature. So, and I'm showing some of my thumbnails here, and I've only recently started showing thumbnails in my classes because I realize people assume thumbnails all look really good, like the really polished, nice little thumbnails that you get on a how to ideate for concept DVD, but they don't always look like that. More often than not, I mean, a lot of other artists that I know and work with, they do crappy little drawings. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do crappy little drawings, but you should. It's a great way to get things out and on paper. I always treat my sketchbook like something I never have to show anyone. Never have to show anyone. So it's a safe place to do crappy drawings. And I don't worry about my thumbnails being good. I worry about getting ideas down on paper. So like here, I was like, this is a sticky note. I have these all over my desk. I use sticky notes for all my thumbnailing. Just thinking about what the faces, what the shapes would look like. Down here there's a couple of pieces here. So I knew that I wanted to pull in like the virus itself, which has those protein stalks, which are how it invades a healthy cell. It uses this to attach to a cell receptor and then injects its RNA, which is inside there, into the cell. So that's its modus operandi. So I was like, well, I'll use that as a leaping off point here. And then I was thinking, well, maybe there'll be a breathing apparatus. And I like things, I like taking eyes off of things. I've just been obsessed with eyeless things lately. Um, so I thought it would be interesting to have the ocular orbits filled in, but all these little holes there, like fractures or cracks or something. But then I thought, in my thought process, I realized, well, if you do that and you put the respirator on there, it takes away any sort of humanity in the face that you can connect to. So I moved that aside. These little bits here is just me thinking my way around these little sockets that we're going to put inside the lungs at some point. Because I knew that I wanted there to be three statements. I wanted there to be the viral statement in the shape of the head with the little stalks, and we're going to make those using a vector displacement brush. I wanted there to be a statement with the respiratory aspect of the chest open and spread, sort of like you get in an autopsy, and the lungs exposed, and only the lungs there. And the third statement being these sort of tendrils coming out of these sockets in the lungs. And this is just me working my way around what that might potentially look like. And this is a crappy little drawing here of, it looks like he's like staying alive, but it's just me doodling in bed at 4 in the morning because I can't sleep. So trying to work your way through things and figure out what works and what doesn't. Let's see, I think that's a double up of that image, isn't it? Thumbnails and thoughts, base part. So yeah, so those are the images that I wanted to show and sort of give you the thought process. So then how do I start this? Well, we'll start this over in ZBrush. So let me switch over to ZBrush. How are we on questions? Do we have any questions or anything, Joseph?
We have a lot of people that are coming. They think your Italian is excellent.
Oh, thank you.
And they want to know when you're doing your texture stuff, did you paint any of the environments of those you worked on when you were doing texture work?
Texture work on what?
On any of the films you did.
No, I typically don't do environment textures. Not that I wouldn't. A lot of it's done in Substance and Substance Painter and Substance Designer. And typically I work in Mari, and I usually am texturing. If I'm painting textures, I'm doing organics. I'm doing digital doubles, or I'm doing creatures, or costumes. I really quite like getting a good digi-double costume and texturing that. It's fun. But no, I typically don't end up doing environment. But like I said, I will paint anything. It's just usually I get put on things that I usually do. So cool. You can interrupt me anytime with questions. It won't throw me. So I'm going to start this using my spotlight. So I've got my reference up in spotlight here. So you see I've got my painting. I'll just press the Z key, and I'll pull up my image here, and I'll turn my opacity up. Oops, wrong one. Turn my opacity up. Opacity. There we go. There we go. Turn my opacity up. So I got my little Procreate idea here to leap off from. I've got. Let me scale this back down. And got a delay on my brush. I've got a bad delay on my brush. Okay. You can stop doing that now. Let's scale this down and move him over here. I've got a little posture study for the hand for us to talk about when we get down to posing the hands, like getting that posturing and that gnarled quality in the hand. So I was just thinking about that and made a little sketch of what I had in mind. And then for the lungs, I've got a variety of nice lungs here, like the smoker's lungs. Has a beautiful mottling pattern on there, speaking of. I love the mottling pattern on there, that squiggle. I wouldn't want to be the owner of these lungs, but unless they were in a jar in my living room. But this caught my eye, and I don't know that we'll get to painting because there's a lot to talk about today. But we'll see. But that's something that I did pull just for the color texture as well as the sculptural texture. Here I just got some nice reference images of lungs. And here is a wonderful reference image of cadaver dissection. I did 50 hours of cadaver lab in at a medical school. I didn't go to medical school. I just went there to do the cadaver lab. So it was incredible, and seeing it firsthand and opening it firsthand is quite something. So here I just pulled this out to get an idea of some texture and some shapes that might come in useful. So I just grabbed things that I thought would be handy as I was working. But I'm going to hide the spotlight with Shift Z so it's not in the way. And then we'll take a look at what we're starting with. I thought it would be fun to start this with a model you all have access to. This is the NIC-Z base mesh that's in the projects inside of ZBrush. I basically just deleted the layers out of it and brought it in as it is. And I'm going to turn off solo. In addition to that, I have my skeleton model that I made. A lot of people have been saying that the link to that is broken on the Pixologic blog, which since I've got Pixologic here, I'll give you guys a new version of that if you want to relink it. It's I've actually improved this a lot. I'm gonna make an improved version of available, probably on ArtStation Marketplace. I'm talking it has um, polypaint. It has multiple levels of subdivision. Each vertebrae is individual, an individual Z tool, and each disc is an individual Z tool. So it's vastly improved, and it has the full detail. But that'll be up on ArtStation. But I'll make a decimated high quality version available again for download. And that's what I'm using here for the skeleton. I wanted the thoracic, the pelvic, and the cranial masses. I was going to work from these. You'll notice that I have actually split the rib cage because I know already that I'm going to bifurcate that. I am going to open the rib cage out. So I just split it into two separate subtools and then hole filled. So I would have the option to do that. And then I've got the skull here, and I'm going to focus in on that. The skull, I'm maintaining my polygroups, and I have decimated it. Now, I'm probably going to dynamesh the skull, but I wanted to have the have it decimated so it was easy to work with if I decided to use it as like an insert mesh brush. Sorry, there's sirens going by. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm looking over at my notes, and I want to mention one of the things that led me to take the breathing apparatus away was a recommendation from a student in one of my classes, Nomi. Thank you, Nomi, if you're watching. She mentioned the fact that it what is it? She said that it felt more infectious without it, and I thought that was really great. So I was showing my creature class the ideation process and talking about how much of it, like at work, like when we're working on a concept, a lot of times we're spending with our backs to our workstations, facing into the center of the room, talking with each other about things, which is a huge part of the process. Having somebody else to bounce ideas off of and thoughts off of. So I just wanted to mention that she had made that astute observation, and it was very helpful. So I've opened up the base body one. We've talked about the parts, decimated the skull, body mesh. So let's open up my second file here. So I'm going to go up a level, COVIDEMON, go to Demo Tools, Skull, Project Primitive. Okay, and then we'll go back to our other guy. So how are we going to get that, like, bulbous shape to the head? Well, this is what we're aiming for, which in and of itself is quite interesting because it starts to actually play with the proportions of a juvenile skull, which is, in and of itself disturbing for obvious reasons. So to do this, let me turn off frame mode. This is just project primitive. Very, very easy. I'm just going to take the skull here, and I will open up the gizmo. That's W for gizmo. And if you don't see that, then you've just got your transpose line turned on. So you turn on the gizmo here, hit the gear icon, and then under your modifiers, there is project primitive. So project primitive looks like this. You've got an outermost bounding box, and then you have an inner bounding box. That inner bounding box here, if I click on this gizmo, I can move this around. So I've snapped to a side view. If I move this out, it's projecting this primitive, which is a sphere. If I scale this up like this, it has this wonderful projected sphere quality to it. Let's get it right in there, and let's move it over here, and then we can adjust our scale like so. So we're getting that viral sphere look there. Now there's other options here. You can adjust your opacity, which if I do that, it's going to change how much of the sphere I'm actually getting, and I want quite a bit of it. I want it to actually even begin to start to fill out the ocular orbits. You can apply grouping, which I'm not going to do, and then you can adjust tessellation. You can also, over here, you can accept these changes and then carry on and project more primitives. You can also adjust their primitive type with this cone here. So I could make this a square or a diamond or any other primitive shape. But the sphere is what we want. If I want to accept this, I just hit the Q key and I'm out of the gizmo, or just hit W twice, hit the gear, and then say accept. So I've now projected that primitive into the skull. Any questions up to this point? Joseph.
Oh, you're good on that. Keep going. I'm just sending them links to the deformers.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. So here I've got my skull with the projection applied. Now I know that I'm going to dynamesh this. Now a big problem when you're dynameshing can be if you've got a little thin shape, you can end up with holes in there. That's easily fixed by increasing your dynamesh resolution in most cases, or if you do get a hole like that, you can always just inflate and then dynamesh again, and it'll fill those holes. I'm just want to fill these negative spaces back here. If you see that, I've got this negative space behind the zygomatic bone. And the zygomatic bone has become quite thin because it's being displaced by the projection. So just for my peace of mind, and just because I'm going to fill this out with tissue anyway, because this is not going to be a skull face, it's going to have this cadaverous quality to it. There's going to be skin, there's going to be lips, I think. We'll see. This will develop as we go. So I want that there. So I might as well go ahead and fill those spaces in. And this is a very, very easy way to do that. Just make sure that our X symmetry is turned on. And I'm going to turn on the inflate brush. I will go to the brush menu and I will come down here to auto masking. And under auto masking, I have the option to backface mask. Now, by default, backface mask protects the back faces, but if I set this to -100, it will isolate my stroke to just the back faces. So I can stroke along the surface without damaging the nice little fissures that I've got in the zygomaticus there. But you see that it's allowing me to push those faces now into what's behind. I can hit that with smooth. Oops. I'm going to go to the brush menu, auto masking, press shift, and then turn backface mask on for that. Now I'll need to remember to turn these off again, but that should be good. I hit that with a little bit of smooth. I didn't mean to, but we'll just leave it as it is. It's fine. We'll just undo that. There we go. So I'm going to go to brush, hold down the shift key, and turn off backface mask. And cool. So that's a fun little trick because I often find myself having to backfill things, especially if I'm going to be printing them, and it can be a real pain. So this allows me to take this mandible, and I can just backfill behind that mandible very, very easily using the inflate brush. There you go. So that's going to fill those spaces out. I can run it along the teeth here, and I can backfill between the teeth if necessary. You want to be careful, though, right there. You see where it started to go around a turn. That actually caught that tooth there, so I want to be careful about that. Ooh, it actually looks like those normals are flipped. Are those normals flipped, or is that just me? Let's go to frame mode. Are those normals flipped? Those normals are flipped. Ooh, look at that. Okay. Dynamesh will probably fix that, but if you do find yourself in a situation like this, go to polygroups, auto group, and then let's zoom in here and let's select those faces that are flipped. And I think it's just that tooth. Yeah, that tooth is definitely flipped. So then I will go to display properties, and under display properties, I'll click flip, and then show all again, and all is well. Awesome. All right, so I've got my little outline over here if you're wondering why I keep looking over here. Yes?
Can you go over that thing you just did with the backface projection and inflate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to rephrase the question.
I'm sorry?
You're going to have to give them the question too. So
Yeah, okay.
Go over the backface projection and the inflate option again.
Absolutely. Someone asked if I would go over the backface projection again, so I'll absolutely do that. I will. I'm going to press my hotkey for quick save, and then let's go back over to our other skull here. Which one? Let's see, has this one been backfilled? Has this one been backfilled? This one has not been backfilled. But I'll go to this one. I'm going to step back my undos to here. Okay, so the question was, can I go over that backfill again? Absolutely. So what I want to do is I want to push the back faces in so I don't have this negative space here, but I don't want to disturb the forms on the front of the surface. So I will select my inflate brush. By the way, I hotkey my brushes. There's 5 brushes that I actually use. I know how to use all of them, except for snake hook. I can't ever figure out what to use snake hook for. I'm kidding.
Oh, I love snake.
Uh, yeah, snake hook's good. I like the snake. I've got a little video actually on YouTube of using snake cactus to make an eyeball, which is kind of an interesting variation on its use. But my hotkeys are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's move, standard, inflate, clay tubes, and dam standard. And I mean, I do use other brushes, like Trim Dynamic I use quite a bit, but these are my real go-tos. And I always say that, like, it's true for all artists. It's true for painters. There's painters, like I was a traditional sculptor for years. I have $1,000 worth of sculpting tools probably in a kit, but 5 that I actually use. And one of those is a chopstick that I got in Florence when I got Chinese food one night. And the next day I filed it down to a specific shape that I needed. And I've had that thing for like since 2005. So you know, everybody's got their 5 go-tos, their 5 paint brushes, their 5 ZBrush brushes. It's all the same. There's a wonderful toolkit, and those things will be useful for specific things. Obviously, we're going to use a lot of them today, but your core sculpting kit is about 5 brushes. And if you find yourself overwhelmed, like, how do I sculpt? What brush should I use for this or this or this? What intensity should I use? Here's a tip. Don't worry about what brush anybody uses. Don't worry about what their intensity is. Get 5. I recommend my 5, but I'm biased. But get 5 brushes, work with those brushes, and spend a couple months just sculpting with those to start with, and work through form. I think the 5 brushes I showed you are really good, with the addition of a 6th being the Trim Dynamic brush. The idea is to reduce your option paralysis, because if you're just starting out, you will get option paralysis. I had something similar when I was learning to paint. I was like, I had a horrible time finding a teacher who would explain painting to me as someone who enthusiastically wanted to learn it. It turns out a lot of people don't actually know how to paint. Uh, they just say, follow your instincts. Finally, I found somebody who could tell me the objective answer to these questions, and that instructor said, limit your palette. You don't worry about all those colors. You paint monochromatically for 6 months, and you'll learn faster. So I'm going to get to that question. Don't worry. So if you find yourself overwhelmed with the number of brushes in ZBrush, limit them. Limit yourself to 5 for a month or 2 months. Don't ignore the rest of them that exist. That's not what I'm saying, but limit your option paralysis and you can learn a lot faster. So the question was, how do I do that back face? So I take my inflate brush, I go to brush, I go to auto masking, and I turn on back face masking. And back face masking will default to positive 100. Positive 100 will protect the back side of the mesh. If I set it to negative 100, it will protect the front side. And you can further refine that by adjusting the curve, but we're not going to get into that right now. So now when I stroke with my inflate brush along the surface, you see it's preserving the form of the mandible. However, the backside is being pushed in and intersecting with the jaw behind it. So when I dynamesh this, it'll fill that negative space. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at dynameshing this now. So I think I lost track of which one was which. That's the one that I was demoing on, I think. No, that's... Oops. My phone battery just died, so I'm going to have to... I knew that was going to happen, and I thought to myself I should plug my phone in. But I'm just going to plug my phone in now, let it charge for a moment, and then when it comes back online, Joseph, you can... we can do the call again. Keep your questions coming in, though. That's totally fine. We're going to Dynamesh. So I'll go to Geometry. I will go to Dynamesh. 128 will probably not be enough to preserve the shapes that I want to preserve out of this. I would like to keep some of the detail of the skull here, but I'll try it. We'll see how it works. Actually, that's not too bad. I am going to be using vector displacement brushes in a moment, though, so not sure if that's going to fly, but if it doesn't, then we can always go in there and leave Dynamesh or increase our Dynamesh resolution. So what I want to do at this point is I want to carve out the eye shapes. I want to fill out the eye sockets and start to get some of the qualities of this creature here. So I will go to my clay tubes brush. I love the clay tubes brush. I also love turning off the alpha because the clay tubes brush without an alpha is a much more subtle brush. It builds up in a flattened form. And I was telling my students in my Gnomon class a couple days ago that if you find that your sculptures look inflated or blobby, a lot of it might be that you're creating form using inflate or standard brush. If you do that on its own, it's going to give you an inflated, blobby look. You have to be able to build up form in a flattened, planar manner, or you need to take the trim dynamic brush and plane back shapes, which we're going to do a lot of in a bit. So what I'll do is I will go to clay tubes with no alpha. I will turn my focal shift down, so I've got a nice fall off on the brush, and I'm just going to fill out, oops, undo. I do hate it when I'm trying to undo and I accidentally show the spotlight. There we go. Here we go. I'm going to take my inflate brush. Now I've got the inflate brush backface mask still turned on, so I want to be aware of that. If I hold down the Alt key, I can invert that. And I'm going to take my clay tubes brush, turn my draw size down, and I'm going to fill into these spaces here. I don't want to completely lose that structure though. I want that structure to hang around because it's a little disturbing to have the structure of the ocular orbit, yet nothing there. And I was trying to figure out the other day, like, oh god, the delay on my brush is really bad. I was trying to figure out the other day, like, where this whole, like, filled in eye socket thing came from. And I remember there was something that I saw as a kid that left an impression that was sort of haunting the back of my mind. So logging back into my phone, Joseph, my phone is back online now, so I can accept the call. And you're gonna laugh at me, but what it was, I finally remembered it the other night. It was the Goonies when Mikey lifts up the eye patch on One-Eyed Willie, and it's just like clean skull under there. I was like, oh hey, that's where that came from. And like also, I've seen other artists. Yeah, my phone died, Joseph. Yeah, my phone died. Sorry. Um, like Wayne Barlow does like amazing stuff. I was very, very lucky to work with Wayne on The Hobbit. It was really funny. My first day, they're like, oh, here you go. You sit here across from Wayne. Now, I grew up on Wayne Barlow's books. Wayne Barlow's Hell, his Guide to Extraterrestrials. I knew his work, but I had never seen him before. Like, I knew his work well. Um, his Dante's Inferno, just I adore. So I'm sitting there chatting with this guy Wayne all day. You know, we're doing our thing, and it's time to go to lunch, and we go to lunch, and then at some point somebody references something, and I realize that it's Wayne Barlow. I'm just like, oh my god! But I didn't want to be like, oh my god, I love your work so much. So it's like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, that Hell book was good. But yeah, but his use of big graphic shapes harkens back to what I was saying about Clive Barker, Audouin Redon, Jean Deauville. I really do love when artists are thinking about the big graphic forms and using the strength of a nice shape language. So I'm just going to execute my Dynamesh now and come over here and just smooth a little bit of this back, and you can see how that very very nicely filled in back here, and we're just going to fill that out with like mouth tissue and stuff, and I'll replace the teeth because I still have a skull that has the individual teeth. So if we need to, we'll go in there and replace those, but only if we need to.
So we had some questions.
Mm-hmm.
If you are planning on doing any more books, people have greatly enjoyed them over the years, and they want more.
Yeah, it's I'm supposed to be finishing a book. It's funny. The publishing has become. I'm looking at the wrong camera. I'm looking at my phone camera. Um, I think a lot of the training has gone over to the Gnomon workshop style of video tutorial. But yes, I will definitely do another book. Just got to do a couple other things, and then I will get back to it. But thank you for enjoying my books. It means a lot to me. I think they're very, very happy that I still to this day meet people that enjoy them and got something from them.
And another question for you: do you often use space meshes when you start out, or is it pretty much always from scratch kind of builds?
If it's a biped, well, I don't know. It depends. Sometimes, um, if I'm on a timeline, like if I'm on a design timeline, which is like often I need to get something out in a day or two, and that's a long time, 2 days. I'll start with generic meshes that I have, but for pleasure, or if something is unusual to a degree that the base mesh isn't going to work, I'll usually use spheres and I'll build something up like an écorché. I'll build the base volumes. I'm actually doing a training series right now talking about that, building a creature as an écorché, doing the thoracic mass, pelvic mass, and then basic forms to the muscles to attach them, and I'll just dynamesh them together. Um, I have so many monster parts. I should make an insert multi-mesh library, but I haven't. But for the most part, it's that. Sometimes I'll use Z-spheres. It's kind of whatever feels right at that particular moment. Like I did a dragon last year, and I started that dragon with Z-spheres, which is great because Z-spheres very, very naturally produce faces that are all pointing the same direction. So if you use nanomesh to create a scale texture, like scales running down the length of a dragon's tail, they will all automatically go in the right direction. And you could fix that under edit geometry if they're not, if you brought in a base mesh, but it's much, much easier if they're pointing in the right direction to begin with. So it kind of depends on the circumstances. But I wouldn't say that I always use a base mesh or always use any particular thing. Was there another question?
Nope, that's it for now.
Cool.
Continue.
I shall. So we did the eye shapes. Right, so then I'll take the damn standard brush and zoom in here and turn off my X symmetry. Like when I'm working at the center of the head, I like to keep my X symmetry turned off because it's why make yourself go back and fight trying to make something asymmetrical, when you can just make it asymmetrical from the beginning. And it's kind of a funny thing. I notice with a lot of my students, they're not quite sure when to make something asymmetrical, when to make something symmetrical. For details like this, I would definitely make these asymmetrical, and I want there to be all these little pock marks and whatnot. Now, here's a neat trick. I have under stroke modifiers, there's a button called replay last, and this is in ZBrush. It replays your last stroke. I set a hotkey for this. It would be Alt 1. So if I make a little hole here and then press Alt 1, I can replay that stroke and it just deepens that little socket. Or if I carve a little line here, I could turn my draw size down and then replay stroke, and it makes that fissure more intense. So what I'll do here is I'll just continue carving these shapes out. I'll go back to my clay tubes brush and I'll select alpha 1. Now something I'll probably say a lot, because I say it a lot whenever I'm talking about sculpting, is anytime I do a negative stroke, I'll do a positive stroke more often than not on top of that or next to it. So there's always a bit of a balance. I'm actually going to change to the standard brush with alpha 1. And I'm just going to build up a little bit of positive next to the negative. Bit of that comes from my favorite book on sculpture, Edward Lanteri, Modeling the Human Figure, which is, I'm going to repeat stroke there. I'm going to repeat stroke here. It's a wonderful book. It's a early 20th century, late 19th century sculptor's manual. There's infinitely more text in it than photographs. You might have seen it before. It's a Dover reprint, and it's just fantastic. It is a different book every time I read it. I learn something different from it every time I read it. Kind of like George Bridgman. And it's very inexpensive because it's a Dover reprint. So if you can, get on Amazon and get yourself a copy of Edouard, Edouard, Edouard Lanteri, Lanteri, Modeling and Sculpting the Human Figure. Because there's lessons in any book on painting and sculpture that come right into ZBrush, because the difference is minimal. in my opinion. There's things that are real specific to ZBrush and things that are real specific to painting and sculpting, but I think that the core lessons are the most important. I'm sort of just losing myself in these shapes right here. I've got one version of this where I've already gone through and done some sculpting on the eyes that I liked that I'll open up for the next step. I just wanted to give you an idea of how I went about doing these. I wanted to make sure that some of these shapes come out here, so let's carve out little bits and bobs there. Maybe we can sort of play around. Skulls don't frown, but maybe we can play around with what might suggest frown lines there. Hit that with a little bit of smooth. Oops, undo that. I used to be able to navigate by pressing my Wacom pen while I was over my object, but for some reason that stopped working for me. So now I keep accidentally making marks on my object. Now I'm going to take the clay tubes brush and I'm going to change to alpha 58. This is really cool. Turn your draw size up, turn your focal shift down, turn your Z intensity down. Now the clay tubes brush, or excuse me, the clay tubes brush is based on the clay brush. The clay brush adds into recessed areas first. So if you take a clay tubes brush with an alpha, or even without, and then drag it across a recess, look what it does. It preserves that recess for the most part, but then adds these wonderful little striations. It preserves the high point and then adds these striations in the recesses. So this is a really neat little technique that I like quite a bit. I'll use that a lot on the body when we go in and add some detail in the body. Another thing that might be kind of nice here is to turn on our X symmetry and mask this area out. Invert that mask, and you can sort of sharpen up this sort of area by going to navigate, come on ZBrush, going to crease, not crease, pardon me, go to clay polish. Under clay polish, you've got sharp and repeat sharp, so let's set this to, I'll start with 6. I might have to set it higher than that. And then I'll click clay polish, and that will polish that area and sharpen it up. So that might have been a little too much, but you see how it gives you this nice faceting in there? And actually I kind of like that. We'll leave that because we will retouch this area later, but it does sort of give it a nice sort of fractured kind of quality about it. So I'm just going to go back and look at my stuff here and carve out eye shapes. Okay, so I'm going to press the 9 key for my autosave. The more people that are watching, the more likely it is it's going to crash and something terrible will happen. This is a nice tip too, by the way. If you've ever got too many Z tools open and you want to get rid of some of them, go to your subtool menu, click delete all, and it will remove that tool entirely. So I'm going to remove this one as well. I will click delete all and OK.
So Maddie, when
Yes.
you are using like alphas to detail your characters, do you usually just use the standard ones, or do you make your own, or have one that you bring in sometimes too?
I have some.
Question.
Yes, repeating the question. So, a question came in through Joseph. Do I use custom alphas or do I use the standard alphas? When I'm sculpting, I'll use a lot of the standard alphas. I have a lot of custom brushes that I've made with custom alphas for specific things, like mostly for painting. But for sculpting, I'm mainly concerned with changing my draw size and my focal shift and sculpting planes in. Alphas I'm only really concerned with for detailing, and in that case, then I have a fair number of alphas that I'll use. A lot of time at work, the fine detail pass I will get by extracting detail from the color map. So I'll run it through Nuke with a high pass, low pass filter and get the wrinkles around the eyes and whatnot. I'll get that out of there. And create an alpha from that. There's also now the brush, the extractor brushes. And the extractor brushes, I have a tutorial coming up that Noman will be releasing. It should be. I think it's going to be free. It's coming up very soon, and it's it's talking about the extractor brushes and how you can take scan data and use the extractor brushes to extract detail from a scan. And that's something that I will do as well, because often, most of the time we'll have a scan for an actor if we're doing detailing a detail pass on a digidouble. But yeah, I'll use the alphas that are already in ZBrush as much as I can, and then for detailing stuff, I've got a few custom ones, and then I like to go find pictures like dry riverbeds and things, and process those into wrinkle alphas and mottling alphas. I think I use alphas mostly for painting though. So, any other questions?
I'm getting most of them right now, so you're good. Continue
Cool.
on.
Okay, you guys having fun? Is everybody having a good time? I hope so.
It appears we got a lot of people that are excited, so keep going.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to open up my next file here where we're going to talk about the body proportions. I'm going to go up a level, body proportions. That's my final, that's my start. I love this. This was an accident, but I love this face. It looks like a Kruger caricature. I noticed that the other day when I soloed the mesh. So let's unsolo. Now you'll notice that we've got now our protein stalks, but fear not, we're going to talk about how to do these. But this is what I did on the skull and these little protein stalks. These are a vector displacement brush, which is a fantastic tool from ZBrush 2019. Believe that's when they debuted. It's very, very cool, and we're going to talk about how to make one ourselves. Here you see that I design wise wanted to create this fissure that ran straight across the ocular orbits rather than being like Swiss cheese. So there's something there, and I find that sort of like thin visor kind, or that thin crack, to actually give you a sense that there's something there you can look at and say that's what it's seeing me through, but it's really messed up. But it's triggering that primordial, okay, that's what it's looking at me through. It's the same thing that, like, animals are evolved to have big eyes on their wings because other animals see that and go, that's what it's seeing me through, and those are big, I should run away. Like moths that have wings that look like owls. So I mean, we are biologically imprinted to recognize certain patterns and shapes, and I think that plays a big role in design as well. Like I've said before, things like big masseter muscles we associate with aggression because things that have big masseter muscles have jaws that crush bone and could probably eat us or are very, very strong. Things, you know, with the eyes further apart and on the side of the head are more docile because they're bovine, or they're grazing animals, which if you've ever been around a grazing animal, they're not always docile. So, okay. Proportions of the body. So here I've elongated some of these proportions. I have not changed the skeletal aspects yet, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to start to sort of elongate this and make it feel more graceful, more slender. Um, Something that I really like is I like a lot. I mean, I'll do big hulking creatures. I did, orcs in The Hobbit and trolls and stuff. But I love, like, personally, like in my aesthetic, I love graceful evil. I like things that are elegant but still scary. Like my favorite creature design is Pumpkinhead. Probably, I don't know if any of you have seen Pumpkinhead. It was done by Stan Winston. Stan Winston directed it, and it's was designed by the guys that went on to form ADI. They were Stan Winston Studios at the time, but Pumpkinhead is a beautiful creature design. It has these long, lithe proportions, and it doesn't end up looking like Giger's Alien, for example. It's got its own particular look, and it's real creepy, and I love it. So how do we tweak our proportions on our figure? I'm actually going to go back to that previous version so we can pull in that body and look at that. So that was skull. No, that was skull sculpt. Oh, 03.
Hey, Maddie, where
Yeah.
else do you teach? We have a question. You have the Gnomon workshop stuff, but where else do you teach? You teach anywhere else now?
Someone was asking where else that I teach. Well, I teach at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects, Gnomon Online. So if you go to Gnomon Online, you can take my classes there. You can watch my video training at the Gnomon Workshop. Um, I'll travel around the world. Well, I used to travel around the world. I don't know when we'll be doing that again. But I'll travel around the world and teach on site. I've taught in Brazil, I've taught in China, I've taught in Australia, I've taught in New Zealand, taught in Europe. I have not taught. I've yet to teach in Africa or Antarctica, so I want to work that out. So if I have anybody here from Africa or in Antarctica, let me know. Um, um, I will sometimes do one-on-one, like training or tutoring, um, but that's on a case-by-case basis. You'd have to email me about that. Um, I'm Maddie at maddiemonster.com. Um, and that's so I will sometimes do that, but for the most part, if you want to take my classes, it's best to go through Gnomon um, or Gnomon Workshop. Um, not I think anywhere else that I was teaching. I was teaching a brick and mortar school when I lived in New Zealand, but yeah. Any other questions?
They want to know what you did on Avatar. They're very excited about that too.
Avatar.
The Pumpkinhead.
Uh, well, I didn't work on Pumpkinhead. I was like 5 years old when Pumpkinhead came out.
They were saying they love Pumpkinhead
Oh,
too,
okay,
but they want
yeah.
to know what you did on Avatar.
On Avatar. I didn't do anything exciting on Avatar. It's not even on my credit list, is it?
It is on your Gnomon stuff. You're listed as a modeler on Avatar.
I am? Oh,
It's on your IMDb. I have to check.
yeah. Well, no, I did. I was a gentle giant when Avatar was going on. So, um, yeah, basically, I didn't do anything of particular interest on Avatar, and because everything that at Weta that was happening on Avatar happened before I got there, just before I got there. So what did I do? I I like processed things for 3D print. I worked on stuff for Neville Page, but I wouldn't say I did any design on that. It was like Neville was delivering stuff and printing it. So, um, I know I did something else though. There was like that show went on forever, but yeah, I'm trying to remember. Whatever it was, it wasn't very memorable. It's like the Harry Potter stuff. I worked on a Harry Potter movie or two, but I don't even remember which ones they were. I'd have to go look on IMDb. But it wasn't like super exciting stuff. The stuff that I was working on didn't get particularly exciting until I got to Weta. And that's when I was doing actual like design work on Hobbit and Planet of the Apes 2 and some Valerian stuff and Maze Runner, all that sort of thing. That was all design work. Any other questions?
What's your Instagram again?
Mm. Maddie Monster underscore art is my Instagram. Someone asked what my Instagram is. Okay. So for the body, um, now typically a body is working under a canon. Like 7.5 heads is typically your French academic canon, and that creates a body that can look very realistic, maybe sometimes a little stocky. There is an 8 head cannon, which I really like, and there are 8.5 heads, and there's a 9, 10 head cannon. 10 heads is usually fashion or comic books. So we're not really going to worry about head measures here. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to sort of extend the midsection, and we're going to extend the arms and extend the hands. And the whole character is ultimately going to be cut off at the waist at some point. We're not going to do the whole body, because then we'd be here all night. Which I'd be happy to do, but I teach after this. I have to go teach my Gnomon class after this. So what I'll do is I'll use the transpose line. So turn off the gizmo, and that gives me the transpose line. Turn on X symmetry and hold down the control key, and then click and drag, and that will mask based on the underlying topology, like so. So I've masked out the upper body. Move this down. Oops. Got a delay on my brush again, which is very annoying. I'm going to drag this out again, and then I'm just going to hit the Y axis to lock it there. Press W so I'm on move, hold down the shift key and just pull that down, and then we can elongate the waist. Excuse me. It doesn't take much. You can really make a massive difference with just little tweaks. So, I mean, I might even dial back from this a little bit. We'll see. For the arms, I'm actually going to turn off solo because I want to see everything. I'm going to turn off the ribs, though. I'm going to turn off the lumbar and the pelvis. And I do want to see the body because that reminds me I want to do the head, the neck. So I will mask down to the neck like so. Let's solo so we can see this. I'll draw my transpose line just like this. And if you let go of the transpose line over the document, it makes a straight line. Hold down Shift, and then I'll click and drag to elongate that neck. Something to keep in mind about the neck, by the way, is a lot of people make the mistake of having the head and the neck coming straight up. Oh god, my posture was terrible. I'm all like hunched over. Straight up out of the torso, but it doesn't do that. The first rib is at an angle. As a matter of fact, if I show that rib cage again, this is something that I see students doing all the time. The neck comes out at an angle, doesn't come out at a straight line. So you see right there, the first rib is on an angle, so the spine comes out like that. So the neck is coming out forward with a forward thrust, which is something really important to get the gesture of the figure. If you don't have that in there, it's going to be the first step towards making your work look stiff and unappealing, is that the neck is wrong. So we just extended that neck. Now I'd like to extend the arms. I love long arms. So let's mask down to the arms here, just like so. Draw a transpose line. I'll go to the side view and I'm going to reposition that transpose line so it's going pretty much through the humerus bone. Hold down the shift key and then I will just click and drag and stretch that proportion. Not that much. Stretch it to there. Now I will mask down to here. Now, by the way, if you run into this where your brush size doesn't get big enough, there's a button inside of your slider called Dynamic. Double click it, and then you can get your brush bigger. So people miss that often because they're not accustomed to having a button there, but it actually works out pretty well. Click and drag, letting go off the model, and that makes that a straight line. I am going to extend out the arms. Now I'm holding shift and pulling the outermost circle, and that gives me the added benefit of stretching the fingers as well, which is pretty groovy. That's something that I want. Take the move brush, and I'm just going to do a little bit of tweaking with the move brush. I just want to really accentuate the S-curve of the body. I pull the pelvis forward a little bit. I make noises while I work. I think that's integral to doing good work, but whoever sits next to me might not think so. Sometimes I hear bossa nova jazz in my head while I'm sculpting, if I'm happy. I don't know why. I think that might be like, maybe there's a diagnosis for that, but they'll be like, I love bossa nova. I like all sorts of music.
Are you still working at a double negative?
I am. Oh, sorry. I was just asked if I'm still working at double negative. Yes, I am. There we go. Okay, so this is a very cool trick here, and I do this a lot if I use the Insert Multi-Mesh brush to insert body parts, which I will do sometimes. And they have a male and a female arm there, and usually, like if I'm doing a human, like a normal human being, I'm probably not going to build it up using those mesh insert parts. I'm going to use it for a creature. If I am putting an arm on, I'll typically use the male arm because there's more volume to work with, but then I'm going to want to dial that volume back typically. I don't want it to be quite so bulky. So I'll use that arm as a start just because it gives me more to work with, and then I'll push back from it. And this is a really neat trick. If you mask out down to like this part here and the wrist, and then if I go to Tool, Deformation, and take this inflate slider, dial the inflate slider down, I can start to make that arm more delicate. You see that? Maybe I'll do it a little bit more. Just like that. And then I can take my smooth brush, turn down my Z intensity, and sort of tweak that transition up into the shoulders, which I will probably narrow a little bit. Drop this down, and cool. I'm going to press 9 to quick save. Did everybody get that? Were there any questions on that? It's a neat little thing.
About where to get your video links, and we have a question: if you think remote working for studios is being more common now, or is it just because of the whole pandemic that's going on?
It's the question is remote working for studios more common now, or will it be more common? Well, it's necessary now if a studio wants to carry on working. I don't know. It's really going to be down to I have to pick my words. So, because sometimes I get all conversational and forget that it's being broadcast to however many people are out there. How many people are out there? Just out of curiosity.
I need to find out where it's being. They hit the numbers on me. I gotta find it.
Okay. Yes, I think by necessity things will have to change. But it's going to be down to security, and it's going to be down to lawyers and studios and what studios feel comfortable with. But if a studio wants like their movie worked on, and you're in a lockdown, you have to be working from home. Afterwards, like it's going to be studio by studio based, I think, meaning VFX shop by VFX shop, and also movie studio, what they're able to work out with security wise and what they're comfortable with. I think, like in London, it's going to be very, very expensive to drive into the city. I think they doubled the congestion charge. So, you might find people it not being financially viable to travel to work, and they're probably going to discourage people from using the tube. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a lot of people are recognizing how much more they can get done when they're in solitude. I spend a lot of time alone by choice. I love being alone. I live alone. I love it. I think well on my own, so I get tons of work done on my own. Other people have struggled with it because they're not accustomed, and there's all different types of people. But I think a lot of people might be recognizing how effective it can be to work from home. I've recognized how rarely I do anything for fun. Like I just do work. I work all the time, and ever since lockdown, this is what I've been doing. Oh yeah. And I think Joseph might play too, because I noticed that he made a set of dice.
Yeah, I do play.
Ooh yeah, Dungeons
I
and
think it's
Dragons.
another requirement with coffee.
Yeah, I loved a dungeon master. Loved a dungeon master. It's my favorite thing. Okay, so the hands. I'm going to turn my spotlight back on, and let's since we've already done the fancy show of this, I'm going to do what I always do, which is just tile them unified and bring the hand over. So I want to put some posture into the hands almost immediately. So here's a little sketch from bed the other day, where I was just wanted to give an idea of like, I was just sort of thinking like what I wanted the hands to look like. And this is basically like this is my like this hand shape is totally Ghastly Graham Ingalls and Bernie Reichsten. And if you do not know who they are, immediately go buy stuff by them. So Ghastly Graham Ingalls was a comic book artist in the 1950s who drew for The Haunt of Fear, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. They were the comic books that were so violent and scary that they actually ended up creating the Comics Code Authority to combat their existence. Ghastly Graham Ingalls, he drew the most amazing zombies and monsters, and they always had this postured quality, this knotted up, real creepy quality to them. And he was also like the first illustrator when someone was screaming, like the first commercial illustrator. He would put little ribbons of saliva in their open mouth. That was a Ghastly Graham Ingalls thing. And then Bernie Reichsten, who unfortunately passed away relatively recently as well, he was very much influenced by Graham Ingels, and he often, like, his creatures will have those types of, like, postured hands. We see it all the time, but like those are the two people that I think it came from. Um, Bernie Reichsten did Swamp Thing, um, and a lot of Batman covers, and a lot of horror comics in the 80s that I grew up on. In back issues, I would get them. They came out actually before I was buying comic books, and then would find them in a used bookstore and buy them by the stack. So this is just what I want to get into that base mesh. I want to start getting a posture in there because if your fingers are too close together, you run the risk of them dynameshing into one, and you're getting paddle fingers, and then not noticing that and having to go through all the trouble of fixing that after the fact. Or you end up with paddle hands, and you're like, oh crap, there's just no life in these hands. I like to get life into things as soon as I can, get gesture into them, because nothing is more important than the gesture. So this is from Zach Petrock. Gesture, form, proportion. I mean, Zach didn't coin this, but this is, what Zach always says on his DVD. There's gesture, form, and proportion. I still call them DVDs on his video training series. There's gesture, form, and proportion. So what does that mean? Gesture is the most important thing. This is my interpretation of it. I don't know if I think you would agree with this. Gesture is the most important thing. If you have a sculpture with good gesture, you have a Giacometti. You have a beautiful sculpture. You can lose the form and the proportion as long as the gesture's there. A good gesture drawing is just the life of the figure. So the hand needs to have that life in it. It has to have that gesture. The form is the second most important thing. The form is the structure, the relationship between the three-dimensional shapes. So if you've got a good gesture, you've got good life, and you've got good form, but your proportions are weird, that's going to look like a stylistic choice. I always say that when in doubt, make the hands a little bit bigger. Because if the hands are too small, it always looks like a mistake. If the hands are a little too big, it always looks like a stylistic choice. So if you're ever in doubt, just make them a little bit bigger. And then proportion. If you have proportion but no gesture and form, it's dead. If you have form but no gesture and no uh, uh, if you have form but no gesture and proportion, if you have so you can have them going up that chain, but you want to be careful. You want to be careful that you get that gesture in there first. Sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but these are all important things, and I hope you find them valuable as much as I do. So I want to get this sort of like posturing in the hand. I want to get that creepy quality. So I'm going to turn on my X symmetry, and I'm going to go back to my transpose line. Oops, go to my transpose line. There we go. And we'll do that same thing again. I'm going to mask down to the hand. There's polygrouping here, so actually if I alt-click, it will actually do the polygrouping. So I'm going to mask out the thumb, and I'm going to mask out the metacarpals, which are the long bones of the palm. I'm going to go to my transpose line, and I want to elongate the metacarpals. I want the palm to be longer. I want to push this. Oh, that's weird. There's a real bad delay again. There we go. Oh, Lord. Let me switch to my mouse and hope for the best. Let's draw a transpose line here. All right, W for move, hold down the shift key, and I'm going to stretch those faces. See that? So I'm perfectly happy letting those fingers stretch as well. Now I want to get those fingers spread out. Like I said, partially because you might run into them being glued together. Oh, I gotta say, since I got Pixologic on the line, hey Pixologic, I have a great idea for Dynamesh. All right, so like you can polygroup things and they won't Dynamesh together, but they split off from the original Dynamesh. It would be so cool if you could polypaint something or polygroup it, and then when you Dynamesh it, it wouldn't glue together like toes. Like toes are hard in Dynamesh; they always get glued together. So just throwing that out there, just a thought.
Toes. So we had a question: when you're sourcing reference for projects, how long do you usually spend doing it, like looking up references and things like that? Or are you just always just are in this reference state of mind?
I have a theory, and I'm feeling conversational because it doesn't feel like I feel like I'm just talking to one person. I have a theory that nobody uses reference as much as they should and as much as that they say they do. um, Usually we'll spend a couple days getting just mood boards, like lots and lots and lots of reference. and then looking at that and spitballing it and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. Um, so I'll find a lot of reference at the beginning, and then look for things that I like in it and pull that out. And then I'll try to have a spotlight with reference in it to pull up, just to keep myself on track or remind myself of things that I liked, because I can go off on a tangent that's either really good or go off on a tangent which made me completely forget what I wanted to do in the first place. The question was, how often do I use reference? Sorry, I don't think I rephrased it. Um, so I try and use reference often, but I never feel like, I'm always thinking that I'm not using reference as much as I should. But that's not because I'm not. That's just because it's a constant thing in my head. Oh, I should have reference up. I should have reference up. It was sort of my mentor in school is a concept artist for NASA and Disney. His name Paul Hudson, who unfortunately has no internet footprint. You won't find him, but he's the most brilliant artist. Actually, we went to Florence and studied together. Um, but he would just hammer on about reference, saying, if you were going to draw a spatter of blood, he says, you'll never make up a spatter of blood that looks as good as spattering some corn syrup in your backyard and taking a photo of it. He called it lying. He's like, try and lie as little as possible. Anytime you can tell the truth, tell the truth. And thought that was kind of an interesting kind of way of putting it. But he would use reference for everything and encourage us to make reference for everything. So I will, especially with posing and drapery, I'll shoot lots of reference. Um, Usually just taking like the light ring in my iPhone and shooting stuff like putting a bed sheet over myself, or I've got a series of photos that I almost showed of me making these like creepy hand gestures for this particular section, but I wanted to cut down on the number of slides, so I took them out. So hopefully that answers your question. So I'm going to spread the fingers out. Um, as I mask down, if I take my transpose line, I'm in rotate, R for rotate. If I hold down the Alt key and click and drag the center circle, it does what's called bone posing. So this is a skinning algorithm that's built into transpose, which is really, really awesome, and I use it all the time for fingers. It will stretch the side that it's rotating away from and compress the side it's rotating towards. So now I want to put some posture in these fingers. So let's go back here. Place my point of rotation up here, because the point of rotation for the fingers is actually high up towards the knuckle. There's a big thick skin pad on the underside. So I want to get this rotated up so I can get that shape. And it's not going to be exactly this, but I want to get kind of close to that. We will definitely be able to revisit the hands later. So then I'm going to bring my transpose line down here, and then let's rotate this knuckle here, again holding down the Alt key so we get that bone posing. And then I really like to have a return kind of on the fingertip. So let me bring that back. So I want it to scoop out a little bit. So what I'll do is I will rotate that and take my move brush. And this is another thing too. I will make so many sculptural changes at an extremely low subdivision level. I was talking to, it may have been Paul Gabbery, or it may have been a previous trainer at, it may have been Ryan Kingsland. I don't remember, but we had a conversation talking about how Dynamesh makes it hard to teach ZBrush. Dynamesh is a great tool, but it actually makes it harder to teach ZBrush because people don't understand, why do I need subdivision levels? I'll just Dynamesh it. Well, you want subdivision levels because if you make changes at your lowest subdivision level, your form will always look better. It will give you much more control. So I make a lot of changes at the lowest possible subdivision level that will support the shape I'm trying to make. Because then when I add my subdivision levels, it smooths everything out and that form is still there, that gesture is there. When you're dealing with millions of faces in a Dynamesh, it can be a royal pain. You can just like, it can be really, really hard to move things around and get it appealing. So that's something I do in my Gnomon class. Is the first day is all about sculpting a creature from a sphere the way that we used to do when we didn't have Dynamesh. Like, I went back and looked at my old ZBrush Central stuff, which was embarrassing. And I was just remembering how, we would have to sculpt something where we didn't have anything but subdivision levels. So you try and like force the neck out of the bottom of the sphere or whatnot. And it was just it was sort of funny how that workflow was. But I make people do that for their first assignment. And I tell them, you're going to have problems with this when you get down to the neck. I just want you to worry about the face, and I want you to experience why you want subdivision levels. And then the second class, when we actually do Dynamesh, then they go, okay, okay, okay. Because I show you my methodology, which is actually on my Gnomon training videos, Gnomon workshop, which is how to bounce something back and forth between a subdivision model and Dynamesh, not using free subdivision levels. I use a different technique for that. So I'm going to go to the ring finger here, mask down to here, and again move my pivot up here. I can talk and talk and talk forever, so I was just checking the time to make sure I hadn't been rambling your ear off for too long. So I want to rotate this finger around its long axis. So I'll draw this transpose line here, go to rotate, and then just click and drag that center circle, and that'll rotate that. And, all right. Pinkies are funny. Oops, make sure that we don't accidentally get, there we go. Draw a transpose line here. The pinky finger is funny, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. We're not going to put this element of the pose in because I want to keep the finger spread before I Dynamesh it. But if you look at your hand and then you bring your pinky fingertip and touch your thumb fingertip, you recognize there's actually a fair bit of mobility in this metacarpal. So that can actually really compress the arc at the front of your fingers because there's arcs all through the hand. So a lot of times people don't recognize that and they leave the palm flat and then just do that. And it's like, oh, it doesn't feel relaxed. Well, if you relax your hand, that metacarpal it has a little ramp that goes down like that. So it's not this. The relaxed hand is that. That drops. Look at how much that drops. So I'm not going to put it in yet, but I'll put it in later. I might give it a little bit. Let's just do a little bit because I mentioned it. I'm going to unmask this metacarpal. I'm going to go to transpose rotate. I'm going to draw a transpose line here. I'm going to bring the length of it back to here. Hold down the Alt key and then just give a slight rotation to that and a little drop to it, like that. There we go. I really like the way like real basic shapes look with some shape to them. Let's do the thumb and then move on. We'll start talking about the body and dynameshing. Or we'll start talking about that vector displacement map technique, which is really cool. So let's bring this out. And you know what? Actually, I'm just going to open up my next file. I don't want to spend too much more time on this because the thumb is done the exact same way as everything else. So there we go. So we've got the body there. Let's go ahead and open up my next stage, which is body proportion file. There we go. All right, so I've actually made some changes to this and done some sculpting on it, but don't worry, we'll talk about this. So what I've done here is I have taken that rib cage and I have opened it and I've pushed in the negative space for the torso. So I did that just by masking out where I wanted to push this negative space in, invert that mask, take the move brush, and then just push it in. And then I take my move brush and scooch these shapes out, push it back, and I'm going to reveal my ribs now and my lumbar and thoracic vertebrae. All right. I'm going to select the skeleton, and I'm going to take the move brush, and I'm just going to scooch this in, make sure that the body is visible. I'm just going to scooch this in. Go to my other one. We're going to delete one of them and just mirror it over, so it actually doesn't matter if they both match up. And I actually pulled it up a little bit because I liked the idea of those ribs coming out of the body and becoming almost an accoutrement or a costume element. And then I'm going to select this rib section here and delete it. I'm going to take this rib section here, and what I did was I went to the gizmo again and go to the side view, and I'm going to solo this. I moved the pivot by holding down the Alt key so I can move the pivot, and then I just rotated that open like this. So I'm getting that nice sort of pried open post-mortem rib cage look. Take my move brush and then just sort of tweak it against the body, and then I really liked this point here. And I like that framing element that starts to create. So I thought, well, this is going to be pretty cool when it gets mirrored across. Were you pointing at me, Joseph, or are you doing something
No, I
else?
was just clearing.
Oh, okay, cool.
We do have a question for you, though.
Mhm.
So people want to know, what is your favorite work or project, I guess, you worked on in your career so far?
My favorite thing that I've ever done in my career is the teaching. I'm more proud of my teaching than I am of any movie I've worked on. True story. I've got students that I had in 2006, 2007 who are incredible and well established and amazing artists, and that's like just to have seen their progress makes me happy, and to be able to communicate things makes me happy. In terms of movies, and my favorite movies that I worked on, The Kitty Would Be King was my favorite. Um, it was about a year long. It was fun. I got to do a lot of concept and then take that concept into a model stage. So I got to babysit something a little bit further into build than I usually would. Worked from art by an artist that I really like, Keith. I have his book over here. I can't remember his name. It's Keith something. I'll go look at it in a second. It was just fun. It was a lot of fun. And Pacific Rim 2 was a lot of fun because it was well, it wasn't my first show in London. It's what I came to London to work on, but I worked on Life before that. And then Pacific Rim 2 was great because I just worked with a bunch of amazing artists, had a lot of fun. Started in the art department. I was in the art department on it for a year, and then carried through and painted texture concepts for all the kaiju, um, just to help guide the look. And then I textured a couple of kaiju. I designed the breach kaiju, which was a lot of fun. The breach kaiju was neat, although it was definitely more. It went through a process. If you watch my video or watch the DNEG video on Pixologic's site from the ZBrush Summit, I talk about the process of the breach kaiju there. So that one was a lot of fun. That and the Kitty Would Be King. I mean, the Hobbit was fun, but it was stressful and it was long because we did it twice. We did it for Guillermo del Toro, and then we did it all over again for Peter Jackson. I wonder if it would be unwise to say that Guillermo's movie would have been better. I shouldn't say that publicly. Yeah, you guys forget I said that, but it's true. So this rib cage, I'll mirror across, and I'll do that using Z plugin, Subtool Master. By the way, before I run Subtool Master, I always save, because it seems like for some reason, the more people that are watching, this won't work and it'll crash. So mirror. I do a lot of broadcasting and teaching, so it's like I know these things. There you go. So look at that really cool vesica piscis there. What is a vesica piscis, you say? Well, it's a really common shape in religious art, and it's two circles overlapping, and it's called a vesica piscis because it looks like a fish bladder. It's Latin for fish bladder, and it's used in medieval Christian religious iconography to represent an aperture or um, a, a portal between worlds. You'll see like the dove of the Holy Spirit coming through Vesica Piscis. You see it's related to Mary quite a bit. So I like this shape. And so I'm going to accentuate that and sort of play around with the shapes of the ribs. As long as they still look like ribs, That's cool. I'm really, really influenced, and I didn't put it into my influences slides, but I'm really influenced by like Byzantine and or like Catholic art. It's like not necessarily anything specifically religious about it. Um, I wouldn't go into that either way um, in a broadcast, but the aesthetics of it are absolutely breathtaking to me and so cool. So there's like the Byzantine and Rococo and the like the icons, the panel painted icons. So I really like sort of taking some of that shape language and then applying that to something demonic. Um, because it's interesting to me, like I said, to have beauty as ugliness and evil. Um, because like if you're gonna be evil, you might as well be pretty doing it, right? So I'm just gonna scooch this stuff in here and just play around with the negative spaces. So that's how I went about creating this particular shape. I'm going to take the pelvis here, turn on my X symmetry and take my move brush. And I have this thing about weaponizing the iliac crest. Like, look at this. So the iliac crest has this really nice angle to it. Love it. I always and I shouldn't mention it because now you'll just always see it when I do it. I like to weaponize it. I like to put it forward just a little bit, or tweak the rotation of the pelvis a little bit beyond the rotational variation from masculine to feminine pelvis, just rotating it a little bit more, just making it a little bit off. So I like to make that iliac crest come forward a little bit and just take this section here. I'm alt-clicking on my subtools to select them. There we go. Now for the anatomy, what I do is I take the clay tubes brush with no alpha. I start with, and I'm going to hide the rib cage really quick. I start with the clavicles. Now, the clavicles are not straight lines. People often make that mistake. They look like handlebars. They have a zigzag to them. I'm going to turn up my Z intensity. There's 3/3 to the clavicle. There's the first third, the second third, and the third third. The third third is up here. That forms the acromion process where it meets with the spine of the scapula. So you've got a joint between the scapula back here and the clavicle there, and that forms the center portion from which all the muscles of all the heads of the deltoid muscle radiate out from. The first third of the clavicle here is going to be the clavicular head of the pectoralis muscle. This is the important part here, is this little hollow right there. This is called the infraclavicular fossa. A fossa is a hollow. Infra is inferior to, and clavicular is clavicle. So this literally means the hollow under the clavicle. There's no muscle there. This is the deltoid grabbing onto this head of the clavicle, and this is the pectoralis muscle grabbing onto that head, going over and grabbing onto the humerus bone over here. So something I tell my students a lot is when you're studying anatomy, don't become too preoccupied with every individual muscle. It's important, but I always recommend that they look at people like Bridgman, who simplify the shapes down to big forms and how those forms interrelate. When it comes to anatomy, I think if you know where a muscle originates and where it inserts, and then you get your brush stroke going in the right direction, you're almost there. And most of the time, it's going to look fine. So for example, here, if I just grab this shape, pull this back, so this is going to be my deltoid. Take my clay tubes brush. I know my deltoid originates up here along the acromion process and inserts down here. So if I just run my brush strokes in that direction, now it's very important back here. We're getting some freebies because we're using a base mesh, but it rolls up here and attaches along the spine of the scapula. All right. So if I recognize that and I know that, then I can just brush my brush in that direction. Take my damn standard brush, accentuate that a little bit, knock that back with the smooth brush. Let's turn our smooth brush up so it actually does something. And then I'll take my damn standard brush and then just run that stroke along the direction of the muscle from the origin to the insertion. Same with the pectoralis muscles here. So I want that split there. I'm just running this brush down in the right direction. I might take the move brush and pull that back. I also overstate stuff and then knock it back with smooth. And I do this: B for brush, T for trim, D for dynamic. B for brush, T for trim, D for trim dynamic. The trim dynamic brush is your friend when you're trying to do anatomy. Everybody always experiences this thing where their sculptures just keep inflating and inflating and inflating. All organic form is going to have a planar quality to it. And if you go look at people like Philippe Ferreau, who hopefully Joseph knows his site, maybe he can share it. He does wonderful and very inexpensive planar analysis busts of animals and people and figures. Anytime you're studying anatomy, you're always going to end up doing planar analysis because all organic forms can be broken down into planes. If you don't know where your planes are, you can't make the shape and it's going to look blobby. You need to have your planes. And I will often come in here and I'll say, well, there's the front plane of the deltoid. I'll hit the next plane here, and then I'll put a plane in between the two, and it already starts to become more organic, but it's got that planar quality. It has the structural quality, I should say. Take my standard brush. Let's build this up. Go back to my trim dynamic brush and then knock my plane back. So you want that structural quality, and you can really accentuate planes and things become very stylized. Like there's a lot of really lovely Belgian and French comic book artists that have this very interesting sort of planar style that's somewhere between planar and organic. But you can definitely use this. Like I use this in clay, I use this in ZBrush. It just helps me remember the right, or it helps me stay true to the shape. And just smoothing things back isn't going to do that. If I smooth things back, that just evenly sort of knocks everything back. You want to just keep adding finer and finer planes. It's sort of like in drawing. Like if you're drawing in the French academic style, the 19th century style of drawing, which is different from the Italian Renaissance style, where you're drawing big gestural shapes from the inside out, which is totally valid. But there's this thing where in the French academic style, you draw a big envelope. You draw big shapes around the silhouette of your figure. And then you draw smaller lines. This is all straight lines. Draw smaller lines, refining that shape down. And then draw smaller lines, refining that shape down. So eventually you get to an extremely accurate contour of the figure because you're using smaller and smaller lines. Transpose that onto sculpture. If you do big planes, using like the trim dynamic brush, do big planes, and then do smaller planes and smaller planes. Eventually, once you've added enough planes, it's organic. It's smooth. And you'll still hit it with a little bit of the smooth brush, but the idea is you don't want to just smooth things back. You don't want to inflate things up and then smooth things back, because then you'll be in this constant interplay between, oh, okay, it's too inflated. Okay, now it's too soft. Okay, it's too inflated. So I'll also do this thing I call catching light and catching shadow. So I want to catch shadow here. I want to catch a little bit of shadow right there in the infraclavicular fossa. And like I already said, anytime I catch shadow, I want to catch highlight as well. So I'm just going to come over here and ping a little highlight right there just by building that up. This comes from Edward Lanteri. Edward Lanteri talks about the color of the shadow in his book because he was trained as a painter as well. And when he says color of the shadow, what he means is, and it's an awkward way of putting it, he means value, the relative lightness or darkness of the shadow. So he talks about things like this, like, for example, right here, let's say I want this shape to be, I want that shadow to be darker. So this might seem like a statement of the obvious to you, but I think it's valuable. And I think also the fact sometimes it's important to state the obvious, because if you don't, then maybe it's not obvious. If you want a shadow to be darker, a lot of times people think, well, I'm going to carve into that more to make it darker. And that's very common, but wrong. You don't want to do that. It's not always about deepening something to make it darker. Sometimes it's about raising what's next to it. If you raise the shape next to it, it casts more of a shadow. So I think about that a lot when I'm refining a figure is, am I building up what's next to it to cast more of a shadow? Am I deepening too many things? Because a lot of times people want to carve like a really deep furrow around every single muscle, and that's a mistake. You don't want that. You want some things to be lost and found. You want some shapes to only be visible as the light moves around, which is something I should have been doing, but I've been thinking about talking. I move my light often while I work because I want to make sure, especially as I get further into the refinement phase, I want to make sure that the shapes that I'm making change as the light moves across them, and maybe some shapes are only visible under certain lighting conditions. That'll help you get a degree of subtlety. Any questions? I need to drink.
People are really enjoying what you got here. They love the tips. So I've been sending them links to all these artists you keep mentioning, their book pages, and everything else.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. All right. So let me go back to my other guy here. All right. So you can see where we got to. And I'm just going to take a really quick little pit stop, if I can, for a moment. Unfortunately, because Joseph isn't on audio, you won't be able to hear him. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my headset down, but I'm going to put the microphone right next to the iPhone speaker. So maybe you'll hear him. I just have to I just have to run to the restroom for just a moment. Lots of iced coffee. So be right back. Think about some questions if you have any while I'm gone. And don't look at my messy room.
There we go. Let's see if this works. Yes, we had some audio issues where the usual method we have for recording my audio and hers at the same time was causing her ZBrush to slow down, so she couldn't sculpt as freely as she would be able to. So I am through the phone here connected. It's a hodgepodge of equipment and technology right now. So I hope you guys are enjoying her stream, and she'll be back here in a second. If you have any questions to ask Maddie, we probably got around about 30 minutes left before we need to end the stream. So if you have any questions you want to hit her up with, she is definitely open to answer anything you guys have, and she'll be back here in a second. So hit me up on the chat here, and we'll go through and try to get those answered. I also want to thank Daisuke here too for helping out with some of the links. Maddie has been, dropping a lot of great artists' names in the chat here, and she does an excellent job, talking about their styles and using them in her work as well. Another thing just quickly to hit on is that if you're just joining the stream, it will be all replayed on our YouTube channel as well, and I'll post a link to that in the chat as well, so you can definitely catch up on anything that you might have missed in the earlier versions of the stream. So thank you all for watching the stream today, and Maddie should be back here in a second. So we've got about another about 30 minutes or so. And one thing about Maddie, when I was first learning ZBrush as well, she was my go-to for all the ZBrush stuff that I learned. Like, I have all her books. She's also a fellow SCAD grad, and so definitely there's a lot of I know a lot of my ZBrush knowledge from Maddie. So definitely she's a great instructor. And if you haven't checked out her streams and her books, I definitely recommend them because they're excellent.
Thank you, Joseph.
All right.
Hey, did I hear you say 30 minutes? I didn't realize that I only had 30 minutes left. I was just going to keep going. Can I keep going, or do I have to stop in 30 minutes?
Yeah, we got 30 minutes.
Sorry?
30 minutes.
Oh, crap. Oh, my God. Okay, I've got so much more to show. I'm... Hmm?
We've been going for 2 hours.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Everybody's enjoying it.
Okay, cool. I just have so much more I want to talk about. Okay, cool. All right, so vector displacement for the crown here. So I was hoping to actually finish the whole thing today on stream. So what I'll do is I'll just I'll record the rest of my process, and then if I do something like that, I guess I could put it on my Vimeo or something, or I get it to Pixologic, and you guys can maybe put it out there. Yeah, or we could do another session sometime. But anyway, so the vector displacement. You will find the vector displacement brush under Project, Miscellaneous, Vector Displacement Plane. Use this one here, Brush 3D Template Polygroup. Now I'm not going to open this project because I want to keep my current project open. So what I'll do is I'll load that individual tool that I saved out. So I'll go to my Demo Z tools again, go to VDM, and brush plane is here. So this is what you get. You get a plane that has a polygroup around the border. So anything you sculpt from this plane, if you extract a brush from it by going to brush, an alpha, no wait, brush from mesh. If you do brush from mesh, ZBrush is smart enough to know that's a vector displacement brush that you're trying to make. Vector displacement mapping is basically, very quickly, displacement mapping pushes in and out because it's either black or white. Vector displacement map is RGB, so it can go around corners. Okay, so we're going to sculpt some crazy shapes out of this. So I'm just going to mask out where that stalk is going to come from, and I'm going to invert it. You cannot change the perimeter of this plane. You cannot change the poly order, the poly group. You can't dynamesh it. You have to sculpt directly from this. So let's scooch this out, okay, and step up a couple subdivision levels here, and then smooth this down a little bit. Maybe I will, oops, mask all this out. Oops, mask all this out. And hey, this is a neat trick I found recently. Go to my transpose scale, put this in the center, hold down Control, and it'll do this. I didn't realize that that was a thing until I did it by accident. And I was like, that was something I was going to ask for as a feature. So let's smooth that back. And let's take the, let's try something fun. Let's go to Transform, Radial Symmetry, down the Y-axis. Nope. X-axis? Nope. This might not work because it's not sitting. Ah, yeah, it's going to work. Yeah, no, it's going to kind of work. I'll tell you what we'll need to do is we'll need to undo back to this point here. Let's undo. And let's just do this. We'll start with our radial symmetry because this will be quite cool. Let's mask using radial symmetry. Let's invert the mask. Let's take Move, hold down the Alt key, and just pull that shape out. Whoa, that pulled that out really far. That pulled that out way too far. There we go. Let's pull this out, holding the Alt key. Just pull that out. Clear the mask. Step up our subdivisions. Okay. And then we'll take the standard brush. Because we've got radial symmetry on, we can sort of build this out. Hold down the Alt key and push that in. And then hold down the Alt key. We can push this stuff in like this. Make it all spooky boots. Control-Shift-Click. I'm going to hide that poly group at the outer border because I want to be real careful of not affecting that. Take this, the Move brush and just pull this in. Pull this in. All right, I'm going to turn off my symmetry now, and I want to give some curvature to this. And I'm going to reveal all my poly groups again and add another subdivision level. I'm going to turn off frame mode. I don't really need to have frame mode turned on. I'm going to mask this, invert the mask, step down, subdivision level, go to rotate, go to my gizmo. Actually, no, I'm going to go turn off the gizmo, and I'm going to use transpose again so I can just do what I'm comfortable with, which is holding down the Alt key while I'm on that outermost circle. Draw this one up here. Let's rotate that one just to give it some variation. And you can make a few of these, so you can have a few different protein stalks. Step back up my subdivisions. We're at 1 million polygons. I'm going to smooth this back right here. Smooth this back. Let's add another subdivision level. Why not? Take the damn standard brush, turn my, I'll turn off my radial symmetry. Come through here, and we can just put some interesting details under here. Take the standard brush, build that up. And I don't want to put too many little fiddly details on this because there's going to be a lot of these. And I don't want them to be noisy. And I don't want them to fight for attention all over the head. So I'm just going to put a little bit of detail on here. Now I'm going to, oops, mask this out. And I'm going to mask along the base because I would like there to be, I'm going to turn my X symmetry back on, but I'm going to turn off radial. There we go. I want there to be an area of sort of transition. So I'm going to invert the mask, step down a couple subdivision levels, feather the mask by control clicking on the feather on the masked area, and that will feather the edges of the mask. Then I'll step all the way back up to the highest subdivision level. Now I'm going to go to Tool, Surface, Noise, and zoom in here. I am going to turn my noise scale up so I can see it. Noisemaker is super fun. Turn my strength. I want the strength to be overstated because I'm going to bake this into the mesh, and anytime you bake the noise into the mesh, it ends up being, it washes it out a little bit, so I want it to be a bit overstated. So something like that's good. That's nice. I love going into Noise Plug. I use Veroni all the time to make little beaded skin texture kind of shapes. I probably won't do it on this one. I'll just use the base noise on this one, though. So I'm going to cancel out of that and click OK. All right, so now I've got this surface noise. I will click Apply to Mesh. And then that applies that to the mesh as such. Okay, so I've got this little protein stalk thing. Now again, because I know I'm going to make a bunch of these all over the head, I'm going to avoid making them too, like, this detail when you're far away from it's kind of fine. Like, I just want a mid-range level of form. I don't want to put too much crap on it. Let me turn off my X symmetry, do a little bit of smoothing along there. I want there to be a little bit of contrast between the smoothness of the receptor here. So I'll just smooth that out a little bit. There we go. So now I'm going to orient it so I'm looking straight down at it like this. And I'm going to go to B for brush, C for chisel. The easiest way to do this is to select the chisel creature brush. These are vector displacement brushes. There's things like horns, ears. These are all shapes that have been sculpted out of these planes. Now, I'll often make vector displacement brushes by projecting the plane onto another model. If there's a feature I want to keep, I'll orient it just right and project it. Orient the model to the plane, that is. But this is what we use for these vector displacement brushes. So with this selected, I go to Brush, From Mesh. Watch the end of that list. Go to From Mesh, and boom diggity. There it is. I'm trying really hard to make that happen. Boom diggity. I think I coined that. So there it is. There's our protein stalk. So let's go back to our happy little viral skull. I often kind of want to be the Bob Ross of monster makers. So we're going to put a happy little protein stalk on our happy little viral monster. So if we look here, it's dynameshed. So we should be able to get these shapes out of there. I'm not going to use X symmetry though, because it's going to be super obvious up towards the front that I'm doing this symmetrically. So click and drag, and there we go. Look at that. Look at that. So for the sake of demo, we'll just use X symmetry for it. I want to be careful not to make it look like Marvin the Martian. I want to rotate them as I do them because the eye isn't going to pick up that they're all the same if you adjust their sizing and their rotation. The symmetrical quality of their placement will be a tell. So I'm going to move these, move that, or add to that and that and that. So I can draw these out like so. Now, I don't know that it'll work particularly well with these stalks, but sometimes when I'm doing a vector displacement brush, I'll change to a spray stroke. Make the spray stroke placement pretty broad, and then click, and you can spray these shapes over something, which is kind of cool. And their sizing, of course, will depend on my brush size. If I turn my brush size up, they'll get bigger. You have to tweak your placement, though, and be careful when you go around edges so they don't crash into one another. But that's a neat trick. I love doing that if I've got teeth or little sockets or something. Real creepy stuff. Like if you take this and then hold down the Alt key That's just total tryptophobia land right there. That's disgusting. So I gotta undo that. It's making me too upset. Um, so that's vector displacement. That's how we create a vector displacement brush to create those elements there. How are we on time? Do I have time to start the lungs, or are we running out of time?
You've got about 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. Any questions on that? That was a big old information dump right there. Any questions on that?
Great. Got everything covered.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Just got to refill my coffee. I brew 2 bottles full of iced coffee every night and put them in the refrigerator. I love isolation. It's the best. I've got cigarettes, coffee, ZBrush, books, Dungeons and Dragons. What else do you need? So, okay. All right. Yes. So I'm going to put the lungs in here. I'm definitely going to have to. I'm so sorry, you guys. I thought that I could just keep on going because last time they were just like, just talk until whenever you're tired of talking. But I don't want to keep Joseph all day because that wouldn't be very fair of me. I was so selfish to just make that assumption. So I'm going to append a polystar in here. Append polystar. Select that polystar. Go to the gizmo. Focus in on it. Whoa, that's awkward. Go back to that. Bring that up. Solo that. Focus. Okay. Press the gizmo gear, and I'm going to turn this into a polysphere, and this is going to be what I will use for the lungs. I want to talk to you about creating the little socket for the lungs that I was talking about. The thing, because I imagine that the lungs have these sort of sockets built into them. That spew contagion out, and we can use a vector, excuse me, not vector, insert mesh brush along a curve to make these sort of tentacle things that come out of that. So to create those sockets, we need the lung to begin with. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to bring...
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you use sculpt mode anytime when you're doing this, or is it more just Dynamesh is pretty much your go-to?
No, I don't use Sculptress mode except for 3D print. So I use Sculptress mode if I need to tweak an object that's been decimated that I'm going to send for 3D print, and then I realize I need to fix something, or I need to add or add a socket, or make some sort of change to it. Typically, then I will use Sculptress mode. But if I want something like that, I will use Dynamesh for the most part. Sculptress mode is perfect for 3D models that are decimated though, and I use it a lot for that. So I'll take my standard brush, build this out, knock a little bit under here, shoop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. Knock this back, clay tubes. Take the move brush, bring that up. Damn standard brush. Most people don't know what a lung looks like, so I'm kind of the Tom Savini school of you can't make it look better than real, so kind of go for the real. But I'm going to play around with this a little bit. This would be a great opportunity to put that cell structure in there, so I'm going to go back to my surface. Noise. Click frame. Noise plug. I am such a fan of Veroni. I want to... If I ever had a kid, I would name my kid Veroni.
Not Decimation Master.
Oh my god, that would be an amazing name. Joseph just said, why not Decimation Master? I love that the magician Penn Jillette named his daughter, made her middle name Crime Fighter. So for the rest of her life, if she's ever pulled over by the police, she can go, but officer, Crime Fighter is my middle name. So, noise plug. I'm going to take mix basic noise and turn it down to 0, and look at that really nice cell structure you get there. I might actually put some basic noise back on top of that. And turn the strength up. Click OK. and divide a couple times. So we're at about 1 million faces, and then apply to mesh. So step down a couple subdivision levels, and I'm going to selectively smooth areas of this out. By the way, oftentimes it's important, I think, to evaluate if you need the subdivision levels you have. So if you step down a subdivision level and you see no depreciation in your surface, delete that higher subdivision level. Like I just stepped down 2 subdivision levels. I was carrying around 2 extra ones I didn't need, so I'm just going to get rid of those. Go back in with my damn standard brush, knock some of this back. So my idea is that the lung needs to actually be in the right place, for one thing. So let's go ahead and scooch that over here. Let's turn visibility on our rib cage again. There we go. And then let's turn off the spotlight because it's sort of kind of in the way. All right, so we want this quality of contagion and infection. So I want these, and I want to be really careful not to go too Giger with things. Like anytime you start putting mechanical stuff into a body, somebody's always like, "Oh, Giger." So I was thinking like clusters of little sockets along here, but how do we make that said socket? So first off, let's mirror the lungs. I'm going to press 9 to autosave. Z plugin, mirror across the x-axis, merge into one subtool. Hello? Are you gonna... There we go. I had to click OK. All right, so... and turn my X symmetry back on, and there we go. So I want these like kind of sockets in there, and those sockets are based around my thumbnail, which is around here somewhere. Yeah, like I want them to have this nice little fish hook kind of wicked quality where they're embedded into the flesh of the lung. So what I'll do to start that off is use this really cool tool that a lot of people don't know because they don't use Adobe Illustrator. A lot of people don't use Illustrator because they do what I did. You open it up, you're like, I can illustrate with this. You start trying to draw, and you're like, what are all these curves? This is useless. And you close it and never open it again. Holy crap, you guys. Illustrator's awesome if you start using those sweeping curves because you can make stuff like this, which I made in like a couple minutes just for this demo. There you go. This beautiful kind of basic jaggy kind of shape. All right. Okay. This is an SVG. An SVG is a collection. It's called a scalable vector scalable vector graphics. Yeah. It's points. It's just like an OBJ file, but for illustration. It's just points and fills. ZBrush reads them. So typically, if I wanted to make a shape like this, I would have done it in Shadowbox, or I would have made an alpha and just made it directly from the alpha. But this is Batical. Watch this. If you go to Z plugin and tear the menu off, go to text 3D and vector shapes. This makes text, but it has this option here, new SVG. If I click new SVG, go to my demo tools here and go to my lung socket. There you see I've got untitled1.svg. If I load that in, it's going to create a brand new tool. If I turn on solo, there you go. That's the shape that it made from that vector file. But it doesn't look that great, Maddie, I hear you saying. But watch. If you come over here, I can adjust the resolution along the curve. Ooh, look at that. I can change my extrusion. Ooh, look at that. I can change my bevel. Oh, look at that. And then, if I want to bring it down into kind of like a nice little point, like it's got a knife edge to it, go to Transpose, Gizmo, go to Taper. This is so cool. Let's taper this down. Oh, but it's squashing it. Wait, wrong direction. I want to taper it this way. No. I want to taper it. Sorry, I'm just having a little brain fart. I just did this last night. And I want to adjust my opacity along the y-axis. Sorry, I got to find the opacity that I want. X-axis? There we go. I want to set my X opacity to 0, Y opacity to 1, Z opacity to 1, Y opacity to 1. And then I'll, oh, where's the one that I want? I want to put it back down to a knife edge, and I'm trying to remember where I got that one from. Oh yeah, that's what I want. Yeah, I want it to do that. There we go. So you see it's starting to taper that down. I will go to the gizmo, accept, and I will taper it again. Joseph, I'm having a moment. I'm trying to remember. I want to taper it. I want it to come down to a knife edge. I'm trying to remember which axis I'm supposed to be doing that in.
Probably one of the center ones, I'd say. Try that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was this one before.
Yeah, I think it's that one of those. Yep.
Okay, cool. So I get this shape. Yeah, that's what I wanted. There you go. So you see it's coming down from thick into a thin. It was just the angle. I couldn't see what I was getting. So it's bringing it down into a nice sharp angle. I can add a subdivision level to it. And then we've got this wonderful shape here. So if I go to load tool, I'll go back up to my lung socket. What an awful sound that is, lung socket. So I've got something along these lines created from that, which we can then embed into the lung. What a horrible thing. Why do I think of things like this? I mean, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. I'll tell you what, you know what I want to do in my career? At some point, I want to make something cute. I have never made something cute, ever. Never done it. I've tried. I worked on a children's show for like 2 weeks once, and they're just like, Maddie, we're going to move you back over to the Bronze Age, like, combat film because all your children's characters are really disturbing. So I want to make an insert mesh brush out of this. I just want to be able to insert these into the lungs. So I'm going to orient this in the position I want it to be built from. All right. To do that, consider your background to be the surface of the model. If I store it like this, it's going to grow out in the wrong direction. I want it to grow out like this. So I will go to Brush, Create Insert Mesh. Oh, wait, I need to collapse everybody down. I forgot to do that. So I will just go to Merge, Merge Down, Merge Down. There we go. So now I've got this guy here, and I'm going to divide once, and there we go. And that's, I want to make sure my poly count isn't too terribly high. No, it's good. Go to Brush, Create Insert Mesh, New. Oh, I accidentally got an extra little blade in there. But that's okay. What I'll do is, I'll leave it in there. Might do something with that. Another neat thing that you can do, if I go to my gizmo, all right, I have no subdivision levels in this object, and I do this a lot when I'm making shapes like this. If I hold down the control key, click and drag. Oh, I do have a subdivision level. I need to go to geometry and delete my lower subdivision level. There we go. Hold down the control key, click and drag. It makes a copy of the mesh. So I'll just leave that copy sitting right on top, but it masks the previous copy. If I hold down the shift key, I can then snap rotate this, and then maybe I'll scale this down, clear my mask, and now I've got an even more hideous looking lung socket. I really like that one. Yeah, I like that one a lot. Looks like something out of The Last Starfighter. Looks like the head of that mace in The Last Starfighter. So let's go to Brush, Create Insert Mesh, and we'll append it to the same brush. Click OK. There we go. And now I'm going to go to Brush, because I always forget to save these, and I always want them later. We'll do this Insert Lung Socket. And now let's go back to our poor respiratory troubled beastie. The one that has the lungs. Where's the one with the lungs? That's him. Okay, so I'll select my lungs. We'll solo those. Clear the mask. Now, I cannot use an insert mesh brush on something that has multiple subdivision levels. So anytime I want to do this, I duplicate the surface that I want to insert the mesh into. I go to geometry, step down, delete lower, delete higher. This is a proxy mesh. That's it. So I'm going to put these two sockets right here. Oh, that's hideous. Isn't that hideous? Oh, I love it. Why do these sorts of things make me happy? So let's countersink that. So I made that return, that negative return in the hooks because I wanted them to really get in there and sort of like have the flesh of the lung kind of all caught up inside. So let's go ahead and place this like this. Let's show everything again. So we'd have to tweak their position so it works design-wise. So, oops, undo that move. Maybe scale it down a little bit, move it up. And I've accidentally pinned my gizmo, so I'm going to unpin it, unlock the gizmo, go to Unmatched Mesh Center, that button there, lock it again. So now I'm able to rotate from the center of the object again. So let's go ahead and scale that down. I love the way those points are meeting at the center. That's a happy accident. Didn't expect that, but I like it. Okay, so while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and Control, click and drag. I'm going to unlock my gizmo, reset it so I can lock it again, Control, click and drag, and I want them to get smaller as they go up. I'm going to solo this again, and I'm going to make sure that these countersink into the surface. Now, unfortunately, because I reset my gizmo, it's no longer naturally going along the surface normal, so I have to tweak it manually. Bring this down. Bring that down. And unlock, go to Unmasked Mesh Center, lock it again, and then I can rotate that, and maybe we want to scale this down just a little bit more. And then I will do another copy. Oops. Hold down Control, click and drag, and then scale this one down. So the idea being that these give you this impression, these are the points from which these sort of infectious tentacle shapes will be emerging from. Oh shit, I accidentally, oh pardon my language. Oh, fiddlesticks. Let's unlock that, go back there, there we go. They are the point of origin for these sort of infectious looking tentacle shapes coming out of the lungs because there's the respiratory element. I wanted to get the respiratory element into play. Oh, I really like that. Look at that shape there. That's really quite cool. Let's reveal all again and see how we're doing. I'm going to select the, oop, there we go. Let's reveal all. Focus. By the way, I don't want the lower body. I'm going to hide the lower body and delete it because I knew that I was only going to go down to the waist of this character. So that I've got the body. I'm going to mask it at its highest subdivision level, step down to level 1, go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden, and that will delete the lower body but retain the subdivision levels. Then I'll just take the Move brush, just bring this down. We'll do something with that. I will definitely carry on this project and record it on Camtasia and then make sure that it's available for anybody who wants to see it. I don't know if Pixologic can host it or how we'll work that out, but we'll talk about that.
We can probably get up on our YouTube channel.
Cool. All right, so I love the placement, I think. But even if I don't love it, we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do, this is my proxy lungs. I will Control-Shift-Click to hide them. Then I will go to Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. Now I'm going to show all again, and now I'm going to select the lungs. I'm going to go to my subtools, and I'm going to Shift-Click to hide everybody else. Turn on visibility on the lung sockets. Ooh. Step down a couple subdivision levels. Take the standard brush, and let's go ahead and build up the flesh that's being grabbed on by these hooks.
So we're about out of time, Maddie.
Yeah.
Just let you know.
Okay, so that's it. So much to say. There's always so much to say. But I really, really, really hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry that we wouldn't get as far as I expected to, but I hope that you found some of the ramblings useful.
Definitely enjoyed the stuff you went through. They're all learned a lot.
Oh,
They're
good.
excited about the amount of knowledge they've picked up just recently.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear. Joseph was just telling me that you guys enjoyed it. So, um, I just want to sort of sculpt that to look like those hooks are interacting, and you kind of get the idea. So, um, yeah, I will, because this has been my pet project for a couple weeks right now, just like thinking of things with it. I'll definitely finish it and put a video up of it for you. And I'll also get that decimated skeleton up, and if you want the high resolution, I can get you a link to that. So, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest. And thank you to Pixologic again and Joseph for being up at a ridiculous hour in the morning for him. Um, and yeah, you guys, come say hi on Facebook or Instagram and or ArtStation, and yeah, and I'll follow you back, and we can look at each other's artwork and all that. So thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day in quarantine, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you. So I guess I just press the stop streaming button now, right?
Yeah, you kill it.
All right.
And then we'll be in touch. We'll get this
Okay.
video out.
Okay.